The other day when I was talking about why Surrey is such a popular place to build these massive developments, I forgot to include it's because there's a lot of empty space. I just walked through some of it. It's gorgeous. I mean, people got their regular old houses there, you know, and big old trees around and grass in the field, and now they're fenced off. They're going to be you're going to build these things there. It's going to ruin a lot of what's nice about Surrey. There's no question about it. I mean, they're cool. The whole thing is cool. It's cool that there's going to be a lot of you're going to have high density. I like that. Not everybody does. Anyway, so on to today's story. Yesterday, the CBC had an article about how a girl had suffered a tremendous amount of racism. She's I would say a light black woman. You know, it's a factor. If you say that you're being victimized by racists because you're black, it's a normal thing to ask. Okay, so you say so. Anyway, this is in the CBC, and they've decided that in the article, if I remember it correctly, they've recognized that there's a real problem and that they're attempting to do something about it. And I think that they did include some mention of the fact that some of the teachers or administrators were involved. Okay, so I just thought I would check out the story. So what I did was I went over to the high school, and I found some kids that were willing to have a conversation about it. I'd say they're probably grade 12 students. And I asked them, and you know, just, is it kind of cool here, or is there a problem? And they said, well, we don't really feel much of a problem, but what happened is that there was a kind of an anonymous tip line that was put up for black people to report incidents of racism. I mean, they've got to find racism somewhere, or how are they going to justify their diversity hiring? And I mean, a lot of these people, all they've ever done is bemoan white racists, and that's their job, it's their profession, it's what they do. And so they've got to find it somewhere. They've got to create the illusion that it's still a problem. So I asked these people whether they thought there was a problem, and no, they didn't really. But I'm repeating myself, I know. But according to what results from an anonymous report line, I guess you'd call it, found that yes, there is a real problem. Okay, so number one, it's anonymous. I don't know who did that. Number two, we're all encouraged to find it and stamp it out, you know. So they would be encouraged to do it for that reason. And I'm sure that there were actual acts of racism that occur because people are kind of racist. But the interesting thing about the school is I would say that it's about 60% people from India. And Surrey has more black people than the rest of British Columbia combined. That's including Vancouver and New Westminster and everything else. So there was, like you'd expect, 50-60% people from India. I'd say 10-15% from 10-15% black and 10-15% white. That's the rough. And then, you know, people, some Chinese, and you know, but whites are definitely a minority there in that school. And when people talk about racism, the first thing that they think of is, oh, it's white people being racist because we invented racism and all that. This is an issue that is interesting to me because I know that all races are capable of racism. In my experience, all races are capable of racism. And some have a particularly nasty history of it as well. So I'm not talking about this school or anything else, but just do a little research and see what the experience of black people in either the Middle East or in India is. Just ask them where they'd rather live. I mean, if you're interested in this issue at all. So anyway, so I got talking to them some more, and what they said was that Yeah, there was an issue, but they got rid of vice principal, who was apparently the source of a lot of it. So they had a racist vice principal. So, okay, so there actually is a problem. But if you're imagining a white guy, you got it completely wrong, because it was a Muslim woman. And what the students' feeling is that the racism was coming from her. And that since they got rid of her, the problem seems to have disappeared. And anyway, I mean, you can see that they're getting along, mostly. But to be really honest, I would have to say that the black students there did look a bit, I don't know. Like, they weren't as comfortable as the other kids. I would say that for sure. But there's another funny side to the story, and that's how could the administrators and the teachers let that happen over the last 4 or 5 years, with all the emphasis put on, tackling racism and all that, and it still happened? Like, do you actually believe that? And maybe it did happen, and the reason that they had a difficult time cracking down on it is because it was coming from students that weren't white themselves. That might be it. Anyway, a little independent journalism there, I guess. Going to fact check a CBC story. Is there anything that I've forgotten? No, I don't think so. Okay, I guess I could just comment on it. I was going to film it, but I walked past the bookstore today, and they had a list of banned books. The banned books were in the window, and I noticed that one of them was Animal Farm. And what they said is that in a lot of places in the United States, actually their impression was everywhere in the United States, you can't carry it in a library. I don't believe that's... They've been banned, and librarians that have been refusing and putting on the shelves anyway have been the subject of death threats. Isn't that fantastic? George Orwell knew a lot about communism because he was a communist in the early part of his life.